What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Movie Emporium's TV review of Bel-Air Season 1, Episode 7, Payback's a Bitch. Now, before we begin, if you like this channel, awesome. Hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button as well as commenting below on any video that you watch, including this one. So, I want to say that I enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a pretty decent episode. I don't know if I love the episode, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm starting to kind of fall off a little bit of the series in general, but I don't think it's as bad as it can be. But it's just like, we have an episode where it deals with our identity, our persona, who we are, how we've pushed off ourselves on other people and how that's affected other people, and the dynamics of how when we get to a certain point of that relationship with our friends, family, and so on and so forth, where do we take the next step? So it's not a bad episode. It's not like the greatest episode in the world, but it seems like every single major character outside of Will and Lisa are dealing with some identity situational issues, and the way the characters play out kind of is in different forms and respects. But Will and Lisa, of course, are having to hide the fact that they are very much a couple. They're trying to hide that from Carlton, but Lisa's like, you need to tell Carlton. And on top of that, they're dealing with Fred and the situation with Phil and the whole idea of the DA ship and how they're going against each other. And it makes for like a Romeo and Juliet type of situation. And I'm not saying they're going to die at the end. I'm just saying the idea of two warring factors, and then you have the couple in the middle that are of those two warring factors. So that's what it feels like with these two individuals. And it does play out a little bit during the party where Will and, of course, Lisa discuss like who they really are. They're going to be more open to each other. And the thing about TV series, I know they had to prolong what Will's actual meaning for being in Bel-Air is, but when they're up in the bedroom before they actually have sex and stuff like that, they start discussing, but they give a little bit of tidbits of each other. Lisa, her real name is Balula, I think it was. I think that's what she said her name was. And she doesn't really give that much information, just a few small tidbits. And this is where the kind of cliche moment happens where Will says the reason he's in LA is to get a better, in Bel-Air is to get a better education, which is kind of true. But the fact that he doesn't tell Lisa, who's really attracted to, and then she's really attracted to him, why he's actually in Bel-Air, it's a little bit of a cop-out, to be fairly honest. I don't like it. I hate when they do this thing because it's prolonging the eventual revelation that either Carlton's going to say something or somebody is going to come out in the open of what exactly, of course, Will's doing in Bel-Air and why he stayed there. And I don't know. I just feel like this is a writer problem in a show that once again consistently kind of falls back on these tropes, especially in shows like this, where we have an individual that is holding a secret that we know about that will not get revealed until like the last episode of the season. I mean, she ends up helping Carlton in the end, and he kind of figures out that they're a couple now. But it's just like, it's the same thing with other stories too. It's very much a very tropey show now that's doing very tropey stuff, and I can't get on board with it sometimes. I really can't. Maybe it's just I've watched so many movies and so many shows and seen so many of these things done over and over and over again that it just feels stale, to be fairly honest. That's why, I'll watch a show like, Suspicion or After Party or any of these shows that try to do something different and try to go into new realms and territories, but it feels like they're falling on the back of the drama tropes. And maybe people don't agree with me, that's fine, but I just wish Will would have told her. I don't know. It's not the fake character's fault. It's just the fact that you're very kind of frustrated with the storytelling aspects. But like, I do like the fact that Carlton, even though he worries about his image, I guess you could say, he does something where he breaks Connor's arm during a lacrosse meet because Connor says something. He confides in Will. Will tries to help him by throwing this party, and he meets a girl named, I think, Aisha or Alicia or something of that nature, where she tries to explain to Carlton, and this is something that I hope Carlton uses as, at least I hope the writers use for Carlton to kind of expand who he is, which I kind of worry they're not going to do. But she tries to explain to him that you're in this group of individuals that are very, very white, that, you're doing you're like yachts and you're playing lacrosse and you're doing all this stuff, and you're never kind of going back to your roots, which Carlton is very privileged. He has a lot of privilege to him with how rich he is and his parents, stuff like that. And he uses that as kind of a crutch. And I think what the story's trying to do, or at least I hope it's trying to do, and Will even explains to him, is you got to find a new image for yourself. You got to get out of the situation where you can't let the people around you define who you are. You got to be who you are. You got to also remember where you come from. And that's the problem with Carlton's character in this series, is he forgets that. He uses it as a crutch, and he takes it into new forms and realities that really affect his character. And that's why it's been so frustrating, because he does the same thing over and over and over, doesn't learn anything. And when his friends call him into the game room, because like I said, there's a party in this series and this episode, which has its moments with like Hilary and stuff like that. His friends stick up for him because they realize that Connor is a bad influence for Carlton, and Carlton, I think, realizes that as well. He sees Alicia in this room, or Aisha, I'm sorry, and she kind of like, cup and thing, nods her head, and he goes to play pool with his friends because I think he understands like where he is and where his place in the matter is. But I think her being in that corner is going to help him kind of level himself out as a character. Now, I do have to say, I know this is, I've said this in episode 6, where I know this is a first season. I know they have to work out the kinks, and I hope season 2 doesn't fall into that season 2 trap where it becomes really terrible. I'm glad that at least a little development happens, and I'll explain the end when we get to that point, at the end of this review. But that's where we'll leave Carlton for a second, and we shift over to Vivian's character. And Vivian's really found this kind of new groove of her art dealership and stuff like that with Reed's character. She actually says something to Hilary, which I'll talk about in Hilary's arc, the arcs section, that is really actually profound in a lot of respects. I give some credit and points to the writers for giving to Viv. And Viv's a character who I really didn't like in the beginning, but she's made this kind of smallish turn, I guess you could say, where she's going to meet Reed. She's really angry with what Phil has not told her, which he's donated more and more of his money to his campaign because they've lost sponsorships. And she basically is that character where Phil has turned into this individual who is trying everything in his power to become a DA, and he's losing sight of what it means to be a DA. And now that we hold the whole Fred situation, and Fred's taking all his sponsorships and stuff like that, his all endorsements, she decides she's going to do her thing in the art thing, and that's when Jeffrey gives an envelope a folder to Phil about Reed, and he looks at it, and what it says. Reed is an individual that, at least from the outskirts, is an individual that's kind of ruined careers, as we learn later on, because he's like trying to basically have sex with these women. So he's doing everything in his power to kind of do the art thing to keep them in line with him until he kind of dumps them for somebody else. So when Vivian goes to the meetup with Reed at this restaurant, Phil shows up. And at first, Vivian's like really apprehensive about it. Like, why is he there? Phil, not really understanding or reading the room very well, or at least he attempts to read the room, gets in this little bit of an argument with Reed, and then Vivian gets a little bit of argument with Phil, and it kind of backfires on Phil a little bit. And then they find themselves up in the bedroom, and this is when kind of what we've known is coming, where Phil and Viv have an argument. And Viv is an individual, is very headstrong. She knows who she is, and it comes to light that she never feels like Phil ever supported her. And Phil's like, I always supported you. You just ran through the window of like you were worried and you were burnt out, as she says. But the real problem and the real situational thing about this is the relationship between Phil and Viv is almost surface level at this point. It doesn't feel like a truly loved romance relationship. And you see the way they talk when they're laying in the bed, and how Phil was trying to explain her stuff about her art thing and being there for her, and then she claps back at him and with the whole idea of not supporting him, and then she tells him to leave. It's Phil's kind of misconception of Viv as a character, Viv as an individual. So this is the downside to Phil's character a little bit, where he's so one-minded on his DA-ship and how they go forward that he kind of misses the room and misses the ideas of what she's trying to present. And he eventually leaves, and then she goes down and she talks about the art dealer or whatever thing is, and I think it's going to lead to some real tropey territory, to be fairly honest, with Reed, that she's going to finally maybe feel that Phil was right, and it's going to kind of change the dynamic. I think for the most part, it's an interesting kind of story that does lead into some, you've seen it there done before, but unlike the Lisa and Will stuff, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's still not the best thing I've ever seen. The series seems like stuck in its own tracks, and it doesn't want to move very fast, but when it moves, it's interesting, but not as interesting as you hope. So it's continuing its pace along. But like I said, there's 3 more episodes, so I'm hoping it kind of straightens itself a little bit. But for right now, it is what it is, and you have to kind of accept it. But it's just, to do a review for it, I have to call it the flaws of the many tropes that are being thrown out in this episode. And like I said, I hope they kind of gel it right, or they're going to lose viewership. And I know a lot of people are really not on board because of how the dynamic change of this show compared to what it used to be in the Fresh Prince days. And we'll kind of end it there with the whole Vivian arc, because like I said, she made Phil leave. But this leads to Hilary's character, and Hilary does something really stupid, to be fairly honest. She is not very smart in this episode, where the episode prior, she had filmed herself in lingerie, very sexy, with the torch, and she's like, now let's begin, because she's gonna make food, because she's having issues with like viewership and stuff like that. I don't know much about influencer houses. I don't know much about the world of social media and stuff like this. But if you're an influencer house and it's constantly wired to YouTube and Twitter and Snapchat or whatever they're viewing from, you have to know a little bit about the idea of the cloud. Even though I know about the cloud, that if you put things up there, especially in an influencer house, there's a good chance Kylo's going to be able to find it, and all these devices are connected to that cloud. I think it's part of her contract, and she, of course, as she always does, goes and runs to mommy and daddy because she doesn't like the situation at hand. Her mom, Viv, when she tells her what happens and she shows the video and she's like, I need daddy to correct this, Vivian, in all her warts, actually says something pretty profound, where I kind of boil it down. It's not the exact thing she says, but she in essence says, maybe instead of going to your dad and having him fix it, which he will do, he loves you, he will be there in every inch imaginable for you, maybe you should become a big woman and do it yourself, get out of this contract, figure it out yourself. And that's a really important thing to tell people, especially young people, when they're growing up, is at some point your parents are not going to be able to relegate and help you, or are going to be there for you, and you have to be your own person. And I really like that speech, because when Phil comes in after his conversation with his whole thing with his DA-ship, she actually changes her mind and she actually walks away. And I thought that was a pretty good moment for a mom and daughter situation, or a parent and their young kids and stuff like that, or their kids. And Hilary finds herself going to take care of the situation, but she's got to find out where Kylo is. And then the party happens, because there's a big party in this episode where Will is trying to get Carlton to find a new audience, find a new crowd, because of what happened in the Lower Crossfield. And I do love what Hilary's doing, as being like the responsible adult, even though she knows these kids and what they're going to do. It's like every time she sees the kids walking up the stairs, you're not allowed up there, you got to get down, and we know you're going to have sex, go have sex in the car, which I thought was kind of funny. And Jazz shows up during this, and she and Jazz are, they're having a connection in this episode, as they've had in the last couple episodes or whatever. And they go up to a room, they start making out, and that's when Hilary gets a tweet or a text about where Kylo is, so she can go tell him off. She's like, she has Jazz go with her to kind of back her up. And when she goes to the club to confront Kylo, it doesn't go very well for her in general, because he's basically saying that, look at Hootsuite, look at all these things, your metrics are up and stuff like that. And I think that's interesting, because I think it's her. She's trying to stand up for herself, but she's really trying to be an influencer, and she can't have both sides and win. And an African-American couple come up and congratulate her, feel like she's empowering the African-American community with her sexuality and stuff like that. And she kind of takes it back, and that's when Kylo pulls up the Victoria's Secret, wants to work with her, give her like $15,000 a post, which is a lot of money, to be fairly honest, I gotta admit. And Jazz is not happy about this, because he is basically left by himself in this club. And when she comes back, Jazz is like, you made this big commotion, you say you're this woman, but then you fall by the wayside as soon as the money hits, And she does the typical person who gets money and is given fame. I'm doing this, I will raise myself up, and when I do, I will go out there for the kids. And Jazz basically tells her, you're falling into the trap that you say you didn't want to get in. Is being very hypocritical is what he's trying to, basically what it comes down to. She says some stuff very demeaning to him about giving him money for gas and, you know, not supporting her. And I'm like, Jazz is an individual. He's like, oh, sure, okay, whatever. And he asks for the check and then he leaves. It's makes me still like Hilary as a character, and the simple fact that her story, you know, has to have those fallback points to her to learn her lessons. And unlike Carlton, she is a character that's stayed consistent. Yes, she has that fallback situation, but that happens in storytelling. Yes, that is a trope. I don't have a problem with that trope because you need that kind of story character arc to progress a story forward in a particular character. And like I said, the problem I have with Carlton is he always constantly falls back to the same situation and doesn't ever learn anything. Hopefully in the next few episodes, Hilary learns something, whether she leaves the influencer house or, you know, whatever. But I really like that about her character, and that's why I like her as a character in the show, because I think she's a very interesting, very fun character to watch. But that leads to the end where Carlton gets a text from Connor, says, I have some new friends arriving in a few minutes, a-hole, and it's the police. Now, the police walk in and are like, where's the owner of the house, blah, 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 blah. They're drinking, they're having a party. Carlton comes down expecting for everything to clear up because he's like, I live here, this is my place. And it doesn't go very well because he is about to get arrested before Lisa saves him, calls her dad to have the police shut down the party, but to have Carlton and everyone let go, which is, you know, something that, you know, daughters of police officers and especially the head of departments can do. And Carlton sees that Lisa and Will are together, and he gives them the look that seems like it's not going to go very well. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I hope, I pray that Carlton doesn't go down that route of going back to what he was as a very angry, very contempt individual that is just going to fall back on the same tropes. And once again, make me realize that a character is not well developed. So we'll see what happens in episode 8 of the series, whether that changes or not. But for the time being, I'm hopefully maybe Carlton's going to, you know, move around a little bit and kind of, you know, shift his character a little bit. But I worry that's not going to happen. And that's what happened, what I said last episode. I just worry it's going to fall back in the same issues. So, but with that said, that is where I lie, or that is the kind of takedown of this episode. For my final thoughts, I really wish this episode could have done more. I wanted more out of this. It feels like it falls back in the same tropes again with a lot of different characters. And I hope that the series ends on a really good cliffhanger, a really good, you know, bang of a ending, because I worry it's not going to, and that's a problem. But I'm going to give this episode an 8 out of 10 because I still think it's an interesting, entertaining episode. I just wish I could get more out of it. That's where I kind of lean on this episode for final thoughts and the score. So 8 out of 10 is my official score of this episode, which is for Bel-Air season 1 episode 7, Payback's a Bitch. Comments below, what do you think of the episode? If you don't agree, that's perfectly all right. Let me know what your thoughts are on this episode and what you feel was happening for the future. But anyways, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like these videos, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.